All right, I think we are live. Let me just check to make sure everything is working. I'll do the classic phone test to make sure that this is up. And then I just sent out a tweet saying that we are live. So let's see how this sounds, how it's going. All right. Making sure you can hear me. Making sure you can hear me. There we go. Great. All right. Eventually, I won't have to keep doing this. The more I live stream. It's been such a long time, but let's get started. So, hey everyone, how's it going? Wow, look at that. Another live stream just after, I think it's been a week or two since the last one, and I really enjoyed the last one, and I hope I get to do a lot more of these in the future. But yeah, welcome. First of all, thanks to everyone for the really warm welcome back to YouTube after I think it's been over like 3 years since I was on YouTube making content. So, it was really nice to get back on YouTube and to create more content. And here we are making even more content. And there's even more to come because I also am working on a new YouTube video tutorial as well, which is so exciting. But as I was working on that, I wanted to do a live stream here as well, and let's go ahead and get started. So one thing, first of all, is what was I going to say? There's definitely something I was going to say. Oh, yeah. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. Hope everyone's having a great, start to the new year. It's the 3rd of January. And so I'm really excited to start the new year fresh and to make more content here. So why don't we go ahead and jump in? So let's swap on over here. I'm going to swap to the screen. You can see I've got InstaMAT open, and I'm down here in the corner over here because what I'm going to do is I'm going to, bring up this view here where I've got the 2D view and the 3D view. And I was looking at my last live stream, and you can't really see the image viewer quite well. Of course, I could just hide myself, but this is a nice compromise for now. And if you guys can't see anything, as we're live, let me know. And then also, if you're watching this as a video afterwards, let me know in the comments what you think. Otherwise, what are we going to be making today? Well, I'm going to show you a bit of a preview of what I was working on. And let's go ahead and actually load this in 2K, and then you can see what we're doing here. So right now, you can see we've got this neat looking gravel material, and we're going to take a look at how to create this kind of scattered rock gravel material really easily inside of InstaMAT. You can see we've got a bunch of small stones, and we've got these really large ones. It's a little bit stylized, but we can always add more detail later to make it a little more realistic and photorealistic. But yeah, this is going to be super, super fun to make, and we should go ahead and jump in. So, here we are inside of InstaMAT. I just made a new element graph. You can hit the plus button here, new element graph, and the element graph is where you make procedural materials with nodes. By the way, if you guys have never heard of InstaMAT before, you can go to, there's a link in the description below, instamaterial.com, and you can download InstaMAT for free. It's awesome, and you can start making procedural materials and follow along with this video if you want to. So let's get started. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I want to be able to generate this kind of scattered rocky pattern. And I want to do it with basically as little nodes as possible. I want to make this a very efficient tutorial. And so we're going to start off with pressing the spacebar to bring up quick search. And I'm going to type in dots noise. And the dots noise is really cool because it does exactly what it says. It creates a whole bunch of dots, and I can adjust the scale here. If I increase the scale, we get a whole lot more dots. And if I adjust the radius here, you can see that we can kind of randomize the dots placement. If I have a large radius, we kind of get this neat looking pattern. If I take down the radius, though, we can get it to look a little more random. And we can also vary the radius. So you can see some are bigger, some are smaller. That's pretty cool. Um, let's see. I just want to make sure that I can see everything on my screen preview here for the stream, which so far so good looks like. Um, And great. So you noticed here I've just brought down the radius variance, and this kind of looks like stars. I hope you can see that on the video there. Um, just creating a whole bunch of random points, and I can adjust the density of how many dots there are. In fact, I can very easily just kind of zoom in. You can see those a bit better. Just increase or decrease the density. And what this is doing is this is going to generate a kind of like a map in a sort of way for us to create a really neat looking pattern using a node called the triangulator. And the triangulator is really cool. It does exactly what it sounds like. It sounds like some kind of I don't know, some kind of what do you call it? Like machine uh in like a Disney cartoon or something. So if I go ahead and connect this DOS noise to the triangulator, you're going to see that not much is going on right now. And this is you kind of think of this kind of like flood fill. If you're not familiar with flood fill, it's a way to generate new information based on the image information that we have. And we're going to use flood fill in a second, actually, and that'll become a lot more obvious and make a lot more sense in a second. But what I'm going to do now is go from triangulator, and I'm going to bring in the triangulator. Actually, let's just say what it does. So we've got triangulator to subdivision to bevel to color. Let's look at to color here. That looks pretty neat. We don't need a color input though. Maybe we'll do something like, we should probably do something like bevel. And you can see what this does, right? We have a whole bunch of triangles from these dots. And if I go ahead and view this output in a new tab here, and then I'm going to compare between the two of them, you can kind of see what's going on here. If we look at the dots and the positions of these dots, you can see that these triangles are meeting up where these dots are, and we're creating this really neat looking pattern. And these triangles are actually going to end up being what our rocks are going to be made up of. So I'm going to set this to, let's see, I think I'm going to set it to somewhere around 28. And actually, if you see this, this is pretty cool. If I change the dots scale, how many more dots there are, we can kind of look at this side by side. You can see how we can create more or less triangles out of this. It's pretty neat. Um, so now I'm going to set this to something like 28. So we have a whole bunch of triangles. I can go ahead and, stop comparing this. And instead of triangulating to bevel, which is a pretty cool option, I'm going to turn the triangulation data into flood fill data. So we're going to go triangulator to flood fill. And flood fill is a fantastic tool in the toolkit here for creating procedural materials because it creates, well, if we go ahead and do this, flood fill to color. It does something very similar to what the triangulator was doing. It's creating a whole bunch of these shapes. And usually when we create flood fill information, let's see, is there a quick way for me to be able to do this? There's like a pattern that we could use. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I'm sure there's plenty. Okay, this is a cool example. So we got a whole bunch of these flowers, right? And if I put this into flood fill and we go and let's just do flood fill to color, you can see that it's identifying all these separate shapes, these separate islands here, which I call them islands. And so as long as you have a white shape on a black background or black and white, this kind of complete black, complete white kind of looking map, then you can use flood fill to identify all of these different parts. And you can even adjust the density here. You can see I can fill the screen with different colors, and it is able to treat each of those separate islands, those separate shapes, as individual parts, which is awesome. And so that's what we're doing here by using the triangulator to flood fill. And then what we're going to do is something pretty cool. We're going to use a node called flood fill to corner. And this node is so cool. This node is what's really going to transform and make this workflow really easy and really powerful. Flood fill to corner, what it does is it takes our shapes. Let's see if I can get it to, oh, you know what? I did this last time before. I need to put the flood fill into the flood fill to corner, not the color information. That's what's the problem there. And I'm going to adjust this just slightly so we can kind of see what's going on here. We are taking all those triangles and we are going to round off the corners to create round shapes. Let's increase the roundness here. Let's and turn up the preserve cell size. We can adjust the distance here. We can adjust the softness. I think the softness is fine kind of as is. And what we're doing is we're rounding off all of our triangles, all those pointy shapes. Yeah, let's lower this down a little bit. Let's increase the distance. Just looking for some pretty cool patterns like this. And what I really want to do is I want to make sure that none of these are touching. So we can also adjust the iterations here a little bit. Just kind of balance this out. If I lower this down, you can see we can get a whole lot more of these. I'm curious what I had on my example here. You can see what I have, a whole bunch of these rounded ones. In fact, I think I'm just going to kind of copy the information that I have here on this one. I'm just going to take the dots noise, the triangulator, and also the flood fill to corner here, and just copy these in just so I can get these values right during the live stream. I think that's easier. We can take a look at the things that we have here. So there we go. We start off with our dots noise. You can see I've got the circle radius set up here. I've got the scale to 28. We're using the triangulator to flood fill and then creating the corner. And now you can see we have a whole bunch of these nice looking dots. And these are going to be our rocks. Super, super exciting. Now, we haven't actually been doing much in our 3D view. We've just been focusing in the 2D view right now, but why don't we go ahead and start looking at what we're doing in 3D while we are working. And I find the sooner you can start getting into the 3D view, especially when you're starting to learn, starting your journey of procedural texture creation this way, it's really great to associate and see, what happens in the 2D view and what it reflects in the 3D view. Um, and that's when you can start to like predict certain things. Like, so oftentimes, I probably built most of this example mostly just by looking at the 2D view before I went into 3D. But let's go ahead and do it more soon, much sooner. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the material make node, and this node just allows me to quickly view a material, with all of its inputs and outputs in the 3D view. It does a lot more than that. You can do like you know, you can add dirt and dust by using the full material workflow by using a node like material effect dirt, which is pretty cool. You might end up using that a little bit later, but you can see it just kind of connects. If I go into link category mode, I can connect these materials, all these connections together very quickly. So that's why one of the reasons why I like using material make. And what I want to do here is I want to connect my flood filter corner to my height input here for the material make. And then I'm going to kind of decrease the saturation and just lower the value here. And I'm going to right click and say preview as 3D material. Now, this isn't going to look like much because what we're doing here is we're just displacing the surface of this cube. In fact, let's change this to a plane. And so now you can see we're just displacing the vertices of this plane, but we're not adjusting any of the normals of the mesh. So what we need to do is recalculate the normals. And to do that, we can generate a normal map from this black and white map or this grayscale map, which is the height map. So I'm going to say height to normal. And you can see that this creates a normal map for me. And if I connect this to the normal input of the material, now you can start to see what we're doing. And this looks pretty cool, um, but it doesn't really look like rocks just yet. And that's okay because we still have quite a few more steps to go. Not too many, but now you can start to see how this map is going to translate to the 3D view here. Pretty cool. So what I like to do now that I've, started creating some of these outputs is I like to create a reroute node. That's a reroute Boolean node. But what I really wanted here was a reroute image node. And I'm going to put this over here and I'm going to basically take this connection and connect it to my height to normal. That's one way to go about it. And so what this means is now I can connect all of my height information to this one reroute point, and it's going to start automatically connecting everything to the material make node, and I can see things more quickly in the 3D viewport. One more thing that I need to make here is the ambient occlusion map. And the ambient occlusion map, let's go ahead and do that. I'll branch a connection off here, takes in height information and then generates contact shadows in dark places in the crevices where light can't reach. So I can say, again, height, because this is our height map, to ambient occlusion. And there you go. We've generated an ambient occlusion map. And here we go. Let's connect this to the ambient occlusion. You can kind of see it made a little bit of a difference there. If I disconnect it, you can see it looks a little bit more bright. I can reconnect it here. Oh, I just connected it to the height. Let's just connect this back and connect that back in and take a look at the 3D view. And there you go. It's kind of adding some contact shadows in, which is pretty nice. We can adjust that further, but I think it's fine as is. I want to keep things pretty simple. And that's a great start. So this is a pretty cool pattern, a pretty cool material, but let's kind of enhance this a little bit further. And in fact, I'm going to have a little bit of coffee, although it doesn't sound like I need much coffee because I'm already pretty excited about this. It is very, very cold in New York City right now. So more coffee, the better. Okay, so now that we've created our flood fill to corner to create these rounded shapes, and notice how these rounded shapes aren't overlapping, and that is because, like I mentioned, of the triangulator creating that kind of connecting triangle pattern, and then we just round off the corners. Now what we need to do is we need to find a way to sculpt each of these plateaus into rocks. Basically, we need to cut away multiple flat planes and round off a little bit of the surface of these pebbles to make it look more like a rock. And there's a few ways we can do this, but one thing we can do is use some of the things that are generated by the flood fill to corner node. So I'm going to move over a bunch of these nodes and notice that we have this gradient output, and the gradient output matches exactly. In fact, I can do what I did before. Let's make a new tab. We'll use mask here and we'll compare. And so you'll notice that each of these like pebbles, these circles, has a matching triangle here, and it creates a smooth gradient around each of them. Pretty cool. So this is going to allow us to round off the surface of each of our pebbles by using this gradient output, which you need to make sure that you have use gradient enabled for the flood fill to corner node in order to see that. Um, and you can also see that we can use this kind of contrast. This is basically, you see, it's like negative zero point 0.5 right now. If I bring this down, we get kind of a smoother gradient. And if I bring this up, it's going to crunch it down a little bit, which can be a pretty cool effect. But I think minus zero point 0.5 looks good there. Now what we really need to do is we need to kind of composite the rounding, this gradient, and use our kind of circles as a mask so that we only see the gradient where these circles are. And we can do that with a blend node. So we have a blend node here, and I'm going to use this output, this mask, as an opacity mask. And this is actually a pretty cool effect. You can see, the default input for a blend node is the InstaMAT icon, and you can actually see we get this pretty cool kind of pattern just because we're using that as a mask. And if I get rid of the background, that looks pretty cool. So that's a neat effect. But what we want to do now is instead we want to take our gradient here and plug that into the foreground. And now you can see what we have. And this looks pretty subtle, not gonna lie. Um, if I remove the foreground here, well, let's see. Let me make this full white. There we go. And then I connect the gradient again as the foreground. It's quite subtle on YouTube, but you're getting this nice rounding effect where that gradient is here. You're kind of seeing the curves or the edges of where this is, right? Like that. So now let's hook this up to our 3D view, and you can start to see what's going on here. We've kind of just rounded off the tops of these rocks. Pretty neat. So if I go ahead and hide this, you don't get a good looking result. So I'll just go ahead and use the mask. Here's our before. Then using the gradient and masking off those round shapes, we get this, which is neat. So that's helpful because now our pebbles start to look a little bit more like pebbles, but they're still extremely flat around the sides, right? We don't want that. So how do we adjust that? How do we sculpt away these different planes? Well, we're going to use another fantastic node, which is called the flood fill to gradient end pass. So what is this going to do? Well, I want to use the flood fill to gradient node first to kind of explain what it does, and then I'll talk about what the end pass version does that really makes our lives a whole lot easier. So I'm going to connect this, let's see, triangulator to flood fill to the flood fill to gradient to show you what it does. And you can see exactly what it does. It took all of our triangles and it added a gradient to it. And what I could do is I can increase this angle variance option here to give all of our triangles a random grayscale gradient from black to white. Pretty cool. I can, adjust the angle here and randomize it, and that's pretty neat. Now, commonly what a technique is, what am I saying? Commonly a technique to kind of chip away at these rocks and create these flat planes would be to duplicate this a few times. I could duplicate this again just by, Option or Alt and left clicking and dragging. And when I duplicate a node, InstaMAT's going to change the seed value of each of these. So I can get two different, as many different gradients as I want. And then what I could do is I could take a blend node and I could connect both of these, view the output here. So if I just change the blend, you can see we're just blending between these two different triangle patterns. And if I use the minimum blend mode, what this is saying is, let's see, let's pick a triangle. So we've got this triangle here, and if I hit V here, this is the same triangle, but with a different gradient, right? So we have dark here, and then on the other side, we have dark there. And when I blend them together, you can see that wherever's darker is going to come through here with the minimum blend mode. Basically says if you're darker, if this pixel is darker than the other pixel, it's going to show up through, it's going to blend through here like this. And this is how we can start to create these kind of cuts, and shape how our rocks look. And if I go ahead and connect this, let's see, do I want to connect this right away? Well, we can try it. I'm going to connect this to the foreground here. You can see what we've done a little bit here. We've created these planes where we're chipping away at our pebbles. So what we really want to do though is we want to kind of combine these two operations together. We want to round off the surface and we want to chip away at the surface of the rocks as well. But you can start to see that we're really starting to get a neat looking pattern here where none of our rocks are overlapping or touching. We've got some pretty cool splits. That's just due to the triangulator and how it works, which is pretty cool. But I think that's neat because, what if a rock just kind of cracks because it's fallen down or something's hit it and it's kind of cracks and splits in the middle. That's kind of a nice byproduct of the workflow that we're doing. But I kind of want to just, let's bring this back and let's see. I think what I also want to do is, I kind of want to mask away parts of the pattern here so that we don't have this whole kind of like uniform look. But let me try and kind of sculpt away parts of these rocks. using this kind of flood filter gradient technique. Now, here's what's really cool. If I wanted to create very realistic looking rocks, I'm going to have to create a whole bunch of these flood filter gradient nodes and just create, duplicate them and blend them. And it's going to be this huge chain of nodes. And that is very time consuming and it's actually very unnecessary because InstaMAT has a node built just for this kind of technique. And it's called flood fill to gradient NPass. And so an NPass graph, let me just save this here. An NPass graph is just like an element graph, just like the graph that we're using here now in InstaMAT, but it allows you to use iteration and repetition to basically take one execution of the graph, one set of gradients, and then feed that as an input for the next iteration. We'll create a whole bunch of other gradients and composite them all together. And it does this in this loop. And that's why it's NPass, N meaning like the number of repetitions that we kind of re-execute the graph and get our result. And so that's what this flood fill to gradient NPass can do for us. So if I connect again my flood fill to this, you can start to see what we have now, a whole bunch of gradients. And if I change that angle variance again in the flood fill to gradient NPass, you can see what's happening here. We can start off with one, and then we can just rerun this over and over and over again and chip away at our um, triangles here to get this really cool looking pattern. And then I can do things like change the position variant, and you can see that kind of offsets how that like the rotation of those gradients and the blending of those gradients to get some more variation. Pretty cool. And so let's actually take a look at that in our 3D view and see what's going on here. If I connect this as the input, we've got a very similar effect to what we had before. But now we have many more cuts, many more ways of shaping these rocks like that. Very cool. So you can start to create some kind of like stylized pattern here using something like this. So what I want to do though is I kind of want to blend these two things together. Um, so let's take the rounded part, which I believe I just used. There we go. And let's get a blend. And I kind of want to multiply these two maps together. And so when we multiply, it doesn't really matter what's in the foreground or the background. Let's connect this. 1 second, my throat's pretty dry here. Like I mentioned, it is quite chilly and cold in New York. Okay, there we go. So now if I just blend between these two, you can kind of see, well, that looks pretty neat actually. All right. That's just our triangles without any sort of mask, any rounded mask. That's pretty cool. So you could create this really neat looking pattern this way. But now what we want to do is we want to multiply these values like this. And what multiplying does is it basically darkens everything. It multiplies the pixel values so you get darker versions of everything that you've done prior in your blending. And so now we get this cool combination of a rounded top surface and these cuts to create these cool pebbles. And I wonder, yeah, I could just take away the gradient and we could see with just the cuts, we get these really sharp surfaces. And then if I bring back the gradient, it's rounded off a little bit, a little nicer. Like time has weathered away these stones. All right. Now, our uh, our height map is looking pretty dark right now. And I want to kind of bring back these levels, the brightness and darkness contrast of our height map back to kind of like a uniform or kind of a normalized value, not uniform, but normalized value, so that the brightest part of the height map is like almost pure white, and the darkest part of the height map is black. And there's a quick way to do this. We can use an auto levels, and auto levels basically does exactly that. You can see here if I turn this off, and if we look at our height map, and I press H to disable it. This is what we had before. And now we've kind of normalized our values, and this looks pretty good. It's a good way to do it. Auto levels is great. I don't use auto levels too often though, because if you change a lot of things earlier on in the graph, it's kind of unpredictable to see how your displacement and height maps are going to react. So I like to use a regular levels node as well. I mean, there's a time and place for auto levels for sure, but we can use a regular levels. And then really what we're doing here is we're just taking our brightness value and we're crunching it down to something like this. And this actually gives me a lot more control over what the results look like. I can also click this little magic wand button right here, and that does an auto levels operation on this one instance of basically what the input is. And you can see we kind of have the same result. So we're making some really cool progress here. Now, let's also kind of add some more variation to this pattern. Right now, it's very uniform. Someone says, "How long have you been creating materials for?" Also, you haven't posted for 4 years. You're absolutely right. First of all, welcome. Yeah, I took a little bit of a break from YouTube, working pretty hard on some other things. I've been creating materials probably since maybe just before 2020. So it's been almost 6 years now. Um, yeah, I've been making materials for quite a long time, and I really enjoy the process of procedural material making and figuring out these cool techniques. So, yeah, if you have any questions about material making or, kind of what we're doing today, feel free to ask. That's why I like doing these live streams. And I just recently did one maybe 2 weeks ago on creating it was kind of like a Hades game inspired, uh, what do you call it? Hades, stylized kind of floor texture. Do I use the Unreal Engine? I used Unreal Engine prior. I am kind of a generalist more than a technical artist, but I have used Unreal Engine before. I did some VR stuff. If you look on my YouTube channel, you can see I've kind of dabbled in some VR stuff in the past as well. Um, yeah, exactly. Are your live streams saved or archived somewhere? Yes, this will be a video that you can find on my YouTube channel once the stream has been finished, so you can always go back and reference it and see how you're doing. What's the difference between a technical artist and a texture artist? That's a great question. From my experience, I haven't been a professional technical artist in the games industry, but what I understand as a technical artist is they create a lot of tools, right? Yeah, yeah, much more of a generalist, but technical artists seem to create a lot of tools and I mean, the first thing I think of when I think of technical artists is like getting into the shader graph and creating these kind of more technical kind of materials and things like that. But it goes way, way further than that. Um, if you're doing optimization for games and things like that, you're creating pipelines that your team is going to be using to, optimize a game for multiple consoles and things like that. I think technical artists also do that too. I think, depending on how large the studio is, you could have multiple hats, or a technical artist could be doing a whole lot more, or you could have very specific jobs for very specific things. So as far as I know, that's kind of how I think of what technical artists are. But I mean, I could always, can look it up online. But I think that would be kind of how I picture it. I would consider myself a little more of a material artist because I focus on mostly creating like procedural texturing and materials for things like that too. But I also do a lot more with, geometry creation and, creating pipelines like this too. So I kind of put myself more in the generalist category more than the strictly materials. Although if you asked me 4 years ago what I was, I would have said probably more of a material artist, but I've kind of branched out a little bit more now. But yeah, cool question and welcome. I hope you had a nice holiday. Let's go ahead and continue what we're doing now. We are going to basically vary how this pattern looks. Right now it's looking pretty uniform here. And I kind of want to, space out some of these rocks. And to do that, we can just do something very simple with a flood fill mask. So you can see here, we're using this triangulator to flood fill quite a bit. So you can just kind of branch off another connection here. And this is why I love nodes, because you can branch stuff off. Thank you. In general, how long have you been doing computer graphics? Or 10 years? Gosh, you know, for a while I was kind of dabbling a lot with computer graphics and art and coding and things like that. So I think, it was kind of just this kind of gradual culmination of, doing a whole lot of bunch of different things and then kind of all combining together to doing more computer graphics art. But I really like started mainly doing it around 2020, kind of when the pandemic was happening. Yeah. And I absolutely love it. And I haven't stopped since. All right. So let's see. Let's create a mask here. I'm going to branch a connection from the flood fill. And I'm going to say flood fill to mask. And basically, flood fill, it does so many things. I guess one great thing came out from the pandemic. Oof, yeah. I mean, I think it was an interesting time for people to be able to kind of reflect and just take a step back and look at like their lives and what's going on. And it kind of made it easier to be able to pick new paths if you wanted to in life. I mean, I was on a good path in life. I just really found this type of stuff really exciting. In fact, even before the pandemic hit, I was already, watching a lot of YouTube videos and tutorials on procedural texturing and things like that. And it just kind of made it easier for me to kind of just like, I think for a lot of people just kind of stop and look around and see what's going on. And yeah, I mean, that's just kind of how it worked for me, and I think for a lot of people as well. But yeah, the pandemic, if yeah, I'm glad we're past that. So, flood fill to mask. This is very similar to what we were looking at earlier with the flood fill to color, where we have this density slider. And so what I could do is just drag this density and kind of remove away a bunch of these parts of this and just mask off each of these different triangles. A lot of people started learning CG during the pandemic. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, in some ways it was like a really good thing for the industry. I think a lot of like people started to um, get really excited and learn a lot of new things during that time. And yeah, I mean, for sure, I think it grew so fast, right? And maybe that's why things like layoffs are happening. I'm no expert on that side of things, but uh, it certainly made it so that a larger audience of people started to really explore 3D art in general. And so, yeah, definitely, it's good. I'm glad you're looking at it on the bright side of things like that too. I am too. I think it's good to think, the pandemic, although as horrible as it was, and the things that happened as a result, there is some good that came from it in terms of being able to kind of explore and do more 3D and CG work as well. And the animation industry, that was it was great for the animation industry, right? Um, cool. So there's a few things that we can do here with the flood fill to mask. You can see I can mask by density like this. And what we could also do is we could do things like mask by size. So, if I say the width of this tile is, between this range, then you know, you could see these are really thin, right? Because they're a really thin width range. But if I expand this, then we have a lot more. Or if I say I only want wider triangles, I can change this, like that. Or I could say the area of these islands in the flood fill, it has to be in this range. Then I could mask things off like this. And that's a pretty cool way of working. But I think I'm just going to stick to density just because it's much simpler. And we can kind of get some cool looking results here. And all I'm really going to do here is I'm going to take my blend that I have here, which is where we have the flood fill to corner, and this is what's giving us that kind of rounded shape on the top of our rocks. I'm going to use. I'm looking at a copy of my graph over here just to see what I did. Yeah, I have a second blend. Basically, that's what I'm going to do. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to reorganize things a little bit. I'm going to take this flood fill to mask. I'm going to move this over, move this down. So now we have our bunch of random triangles like this. Getting courses tutorial started. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's kind of what happened for me when I was learning all this stuff. I was learning so much cool texturing stuff, and a lot of it like was really hard to find and access on YouTube. There were these techniques and things that I was learning, and I was pulling all these different pieces together. And I was like, I want to be able to share all the stuff that I'm learning. And that's where my YouTube channel kind of started, where I was like, okay, cool, let's create these resources and let's make these videos so that it's a lot easier for people to find out these cool techniques. And that's just kind of what happened for me. All right, I started doing CGR Blender. Awesome. Oh, character art is so awesome. Mad props. I'm an aspiring character artist for sure. You know, I want to like learn a lot more about doing character work. It is absolutely difficult. You know, I'm definitely learning more about anatomy, ZBrush, sculpting. Um, but that is awesome. I uh, really respect the character art, stuff like that. It is so cool. So I hope that you continue to have an awesome time learning your character work. Um, that's great. Awesome. And, you know, I do wanna kinda do some character stuff on this channel as well. I'm starting off with doing some more material stuff, which is kind of what I was doing before, but I wanna do some props work, and I wanna do especially get more into characters as I get more comfortable into it too. But yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, I have huge respect for character artists. What they do is incredible. So let's create another blend here, and I'm going to put the map here that has the rounded surfaces here, and I'm going to use this flood filtered mask as an opacity mask. And what you're going to see as soon as I make this black is now I can start to mask away some of these rocks just by using this flood filter mask. So if I decrease the density here, you can see we have less pebbles, and I can increase it and we get a whole lot more. And this is a pretty cool parameter to expose. You know, if you're using the material procedurally to create a whole bunch of different types of gravel, you know, rock patterns and things like that, is you can just expose this density parameter. Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I really appreciate that. Yeah, I would love to. Yeah, texturing is for characters is extremely difficult too, but I would love to like really take the time and just kind of learn the whole process. You know, skin texturing, figuring out the different you know hues and things like in the face based on the density and that kind of stuff. Like I've done a lot of like research on it, and I'm really excited to kind of like go ahead and tackle it. Yeah, thank you very much. It's very cool. Yeah, and hopefully you'll see some more character stuff here in the future. Much appreciated. So yeah, we have a density slider here that we can definitely expose later on if we wanted to. Cool. So let's leave it kind of around here. I think that's a good start. We've blended our kind of chipping away of our pebbles like this, and we've used a levels node or an auto levels node to kind of bring back our histogram to, you know, kind of like that 0 to 1 range where we're just displacing this and it looks good at a kind of like a 1 or 2 unit displacement. The next thing I wanna do here now is probably one of the coolest things, and that's using the iterate node, because right now, this, this is cool. This could be used as a generator for pebbles, and you can use this in a whole bunch of materials, and we could just make a kind of like a sparse rock, you know, material this way. But what I wanna do instead is I wanna add a whole bunch more of these rocks, and I don't wanna do it by scattering a whole bunch more of these triangles and polygons and things like that. Instead, I'm gonna use a node called the iterate node, and the iterate node is awesome. You can actually see what it's doing here. In this case, it's taking the InstaMAT icon, and it's doing like a fractal repetition like pattern. It's how a lot of like noises are made and grunges and things like that. So if I take my current stage of my material here and put it in the iterate node, you can see what it's doing. It's iterating over and over, and it's actually rotating each, iteration over to, by 45 degrees. So if I go ahead and connect this, take a look at the 2D view here. Let's make this, actually, I don't want to move that because I have my camera set up a certain way, but, you know, I'll go ahead and connect this and you can see what this has done. This is pretty cool. It's now adding basically copies of our rocks over and over. Uh, to create this like this neat looking pattern of a bunch of pebbles scattered around. So yeah, so InstaMat is InstaMat free? Yes, you can get a free version of InstaMat. There's a link in the description, instamaterial.com. There's something called the Pioneer license. So full disclosure, I work for a company called Abstract, and Abstract is actually the company that makes InstaMat. And I would be making videos for InstaMat even if I didn't work for Abstract. But because I love it so much, I just want to be able to continue to share the knowledge. And if you go to their YouTube channel, you'll probably see me there as well. But yes, there's something called the Pioneer license, which allows you to use Instamat for free, and you can use it commercially as well, as long as you give proper attribution to Instamat. And you can go ahead and download it right now and just start creating materials like this. It's awesome. There's a built-in library with hundreds and hundreds of materials that are all procedurally made, using the same kind of techniques, the same kind of graph that we're using here. And it's a lot more than just, nodes. You can also use it kind of like Substance Painter, where you can bring in a mesh and you can apply materials and paint on assets and things like that too. And it's all combined together into one software. So it's not open source, but there is a free version if you use the Pioneer license. But then also, the subscriptions and perpetual licenses are pretty affordable as well. So yeah, I highly recommend checking it out. But honestly, I like Instamat just because I think it's much better. Which is crazy to say. For my YouTube channel, a lot of my videos are of Substance Designer, but I really really like using Instamat a whole lot more. I just think the experience is just that much better, and the potential of what you can do inside of Instamat is a lot greater as well. Like you can bring in meshes into this graph, and you can take we might actually do a tutorial or a live stream on that where we could bring in sculpted geometry here and just drag and drop your rocks and bring them directly into this graph and then scatter those and to create a material. And it's really really cool. So there's a lot more that you can do here in Instamat. So yeah, I love it here in Instamat. Yeah, I mean, check it out. There's no downside to checking it out, especially if it's free. Check out the tutorials on the YouTube channel and things like that. And then they've got some pretty good documentation too. And if you do have any questions about Instamat, feel free to ask here while I do these live streams or in the comments of my videos. Yeah, definitely check it out. Okay, so what have we done here, right? We have taken our original pattern and we're using the iterate node to basically apply it a whole bunch of times while rotating it at the same time. And we could do this a whole bunch more. We could add more iterations, but here's a great way of looking at it, right? This is, if I choose ignore input, this is one iteration. We've taken the pattern that we just did and we've turned it 45 degrees and tiled it like this. And we've even done some dissolve uh, operation here, which kind of hides some of the repetition there, or some of the original map. And if I use dissolve, it kind of subtracts away using a noise to make something like this. And that's one iteration. And I could do another one. I could do a second octave here, and now we've done it again. And I can adjust the octave opacity factor. And basically that means, with each iteration, how much more are we going to add or blend in the that new iteration coming in. And so we can essentially make it so that the smaller pebbles are more apparent, or we can make them a little less, more subtle. And we kind of want to make those more subtle because we need to give some eye rest on the material so that when looking at this material, you can actually see right now there's a lot going on, right? Where does the eye look? How does the eye understand what it's looking at and can rest on certain objects and comprehend what's going on. And so what we've done here is we're using the add blend mode, and I can choose to add in the original input. And this has a really interesting side effect. You know, it's adding the pebbles on top of the larger rocks, the first version, the first iteration, which looks like this, right? And I don't think that looks so great, right? Because it's not very realistic. It's just got a whole bunch of abstract type. That's a great name. What are we cooking? We are making a procedural, uh, kind of gravelly material using InstaMAT. Pretty fun, and we're actually looking at the iterate node, which is really cool. What it allows us to do is basically take a pattern and kind of repeat it over and over again by rotating it. And you can see what we've got here. If I take this ignore input on, you could see I've got my original pattern, which will look like this. And then by using the iterate node, you know, we can make it so that we have a whole bunch of pebbles, just using that same pattern, but repeating it and rotating it a few times and blending it together. It is a really powerful node, and it's one of my favorites inside of InstaMAT. So this looks pretty cool, but what I'm doing here is I'm doing an add operation, and this kind of gives me some pretty cool side effects by adding on top of it. You can see my repeating patterns here. If I add another octave, the pebbles are just going to naturally sit on top of each other by using an add operation. But it's also going to give us, you know, weird side effects on the original rocks as well. We could change the blending mode here so I could do something like a maximum blend, and that could be cool. Maximum is a makes it easier to certainly uh, push and combine kind of like objects together by their height values, which is a good way of doing it too. Never used InstaMat. Is it good? I've used Blender, GeoNodes, and Substance Designer. It's right up your alley then. If you've used Substance Designer and Geometry Nodes in Blender, InstaMat is a texturing software, but it also does a whole lot more. What we're looking at here is this element graph, and it's kind of like Substance Designer, where you can. Seems quite dope. Yeah, thanks. It's pretty awesome. Um, I wish I could take the credit for it. I did not make it, but it is really, really fun. And so, yeah, you can just like create a whole bunch of procedural materials. You can even bring in 3D models and apply materials and paint on objects, you know, using layers and stuff like that too. Great stream, Jeremy. I'm off to play Cyberpunk. Awesome. Maybe if I could catch you later in the future. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you so much for being here. Yeah, enjoy Cyberpunk. It looks absolutely incredible. Hey, no worries about interrupting my train of thought either. Abstract. It is, you know, it is. That's what these live streams are for, right? But yeah, hey, enjoy Cyberpunk, and we'll still be here. And then yeah, feel free to check out the stream afterwards if you're curious how the result looks. But yeah, thanks very much, and yeah, enjoy your time. And thanks for being here. Yeah, hope you have a good rest of your holiday season. Nice, a stream. DB is here. Awesome. Welcome, DB. It's good to see you. I hope you're having a good holiday season. You might recognize this type of pattern that we're working on here today. We're doing a kind of scattered, gravelly rock material. If you don't know, DB also does some pretty cool InstaMat tutorials and live streams on his channel, so go ahead and check him out. Yeah, it's pretty neat. So yeah, we're gonna basically continue to kind of create this cool gravelly pattern. And basically, what I was talking about was we're using the iterate node, but you can see it has some interesting side effects. Where if I use the kind of add blend mode here, and you know increase the opacity, it's doing some pretty cool stuff, right? It's adding those iterations on top of the height map, but it's also kind of giving our rocks some pimples or some warts, where you know it looks makes sense to have some rocks on top of this one, but you know they're kind of like melting together off the side, and it doesn't, you know, it doesn't seem to work. Thanks, hope you have a good time too. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Yeah, happy to be here. So instead of doing it this way, what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to take out the original input here and I'm going to add it in myself. I'm going to basically take the iterate node here and I'll probably make some adjustments to it later. I might want to adjust the opacity overall, the blending. I might want to adjust the scale of, how it's kind of dissolving the iterations. Actually, that looks pretty cool like that, but let's do that for now. And instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a blend here to take my original and take the smaller rocks. And I'm going to, hello, is it DZ? Sorry if I mispronounced the names. Welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm going to go and turn and make this maximum here. So yeah, so this is a bit of a different way to use the maximum blend node, but what you can see now is maximum is, we talked about minimum earlier in the stream, but basically what maximum says is if the pixel is brighter in the foreground than the pixel that's in the background, then we're going to make the brighter pixel uh, appear on top of it, right? So if I do this, what we can see here is with maximum blend mode, although we have some of the smaller pebbles here, the rocks look awesome, by the way. Thanks, DB. I really appreciate it. And we just, I'm going to say add, but use the maximum. Then you can see because these larger rocks are brighter than the iterate rocks. Let me change my view here. I'm just going to pop off screen there for a second so you can see the viewport in full. This gives us a much more natural looking result where we have the small pebbles. They're still kind of gathering. Some of them are intersecting, but we can fix that by using some masks and things like that if we really need to. But for this demo, I'm probably not going to do that. And then I can adjust the iterate. So I can adjust that opacity of the iterations and even the opacity of all of them. You can see I can really flatten this out, or I can just kind of brighten them up. Just find a nice balance here. I think we're starting to get something that looks pretty cool. Very, very cool. And if I hit the T key here, we can tile this, and this is looking pretty good tiled. We do have some tearing here off on the sides. We can fix that. We can use the material finalize node to kind of blur the height map a little bit, but I think this is looking pretty nice. And if we make these really small, then we can start to see that we have that kind of gravelly looking texture. Yeah, but I think things are looking pretty good so far. So let's kind of, for overview, does InstaMAT also unwrap models? Or is it mostly for already UV unwrapped textures? You can absolutely unwrap models inside of InstaMAT. In fact, it's really easy to do. What you can do is in the same graph that you can see here that I'm creating materials, I can just hit the spacebar and type in UV unwrap. And this node will unwrap your UVs automatically for you right here in the graph. It is super, super powerful like that. So let me see if I even have a mesh here. I could probably use one that's built in. Let's use the InstaMat icon. So can you use model data like AO or edge detection? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, you can bake mesh maps as well inside of InstaMat. So like if I have a mesh here and I have this icon, let's just do a quick, oops. I'm not going to use the other viewport just because I want to project the material on top of the surface. But you can see I've got this InstaMat icon, which actually you can see here we can make renders of meshes as well. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to unwrap the UVs of this just by connecting this to the UV unwrap node. So I just dragged a mesh in. You can drag a mesh in from your file system if you want to. And then I'll tell this to unwrap using a hard surface algorithm because you see this InstaMat icon is kind of more hard surface. I'm going to get myself back over here. And just to make sure you can see. And then what I can then do is just view the UVs. And you can see that we have unwrapped the UVs of the mesh right here using the unwrap node. And what's pretty cool is now I can just go ahead and change the input mesh here of the graph. So let's just use something like the cloth. It's going to go ahead and unwrap it. Now the cloth is pretty dense, so it's going to take a second. But now you have a tool that you can basically reuse over and over again to automatically unwrap the UVs. There you go. You can see. Let's use the organic unwrap mode for the cloth sphere. I'll show you kind of what the cloth mesh look like. So the cloth mesh looks like this, right? It's kind of like this cloth ball that you can create materials, using as a preview mesh. And you can see that I could unwrap the UVs of that just like that, which is cool. And then you can go ahead and just export this mesh out, and then your UVs are unwrapped. Or you could go ahead and, if you wanted to bake some mesh maps, we're going on a little bit of a tangent, but that's what these live streams are for. And so I can just say, let's just go ahead and use the source as the target as well. We can go ahead and bake something like, let's see, we could do ambient occlusion, position, we could do curvature. Oops, I clicked that twice. We don't need the tangent space because it's all the same mesh. This gives me a chance to just grab some coffee. Great. If you're interested in getting InstaMAT, there's a link in the description below. Um, Absolutely, feel free to check it out. You can also download it for free. There's a Pioneer license, which allows you to use InstaMAT for free, and you can go ahead and start using it to texture and create materials. And, if you want to check out the earlier parts of the stream as well, you can see how we're making this pretty cool material. But yeah, as you can see here now, I was able to bake my ambient occlusion map, right? My position map, curvature. We can do a thickness map as well. And I was able to do all this right in the graph. And then I could even continue to work with this information. So let's say I have like my ambient occlusion map and I want to, I don't know, do like a levels on it and start, adjusting it and making some pretty cool effects and things like that. Great. Yeah, there is a perpetual license as well. So if you want to stick with the free version for now, absolutely, you can go ahead and use it to create materials. You can use it commercially as well, but you do, for the Pioneer license, you do have to provide some attribution to InstaMAT, which I think is a small price to pay for something so, powerful as this to use for free. But yeah, definitely check it out. And then check out the YouTube channel as well. You'll find a whole bunch of tutorials and things, and you might see a familiar face there. But yeah, if you have any questions about InstaMat while we're doing the stream today, that's why I'm here. I love doing these kinds of things, and hopefully I can get you a good answer. But yeah, this is really cool. One of the really powerful things about InstaMat is doing things like bringing in meshes and other types of mediums like images and point clouds and putting them all together into one graph. And you could see I was doing that all here in the same graph that I was doing to make this cool material. So let's just do a quick recap about what we've done here today. I'm probably guessing, let's see, how long have we been streaming for? About an hour? We can try and do a little bit of color work as well in the stream. And then probably after we add some color and maybe adjust the roughness information and things like that, that's probably where I'm going to call it a day for the stream today, because I also want to try and record another tutorial for my YouTube channel later, just because I have another cool rock-based material that I want to make. So let's recap. We started off with the dots noise. The dots noise is great. It does exactly what it says it does. It makes dots, and this is exactly what we need. And we're using a special node called the triangulator, and the triangulator basically, if I use this triangulator to bevel node, creates a whole bunch of triangles using these dots as a map. You can see where this dot is. That's where those triangles are meeting, and it's creating this really cool pattern, right? Then we're taking our triangulator data and we're converting it into flood fill information. And if you've never used flood fill before, it basically takes a whole bunch of these, small looking shapes, and it allows you to do randomization and different things to each of these individual kind of islands uh, in a very, efficient, cool way. So we're turning our triangulator information into flood fill information, And then we're using this really cool node called flood fill to corner. And flood fill to corner takes, here, let me bring up a Voronoi pattern node. All right, Voronoi cracks. And I forget, can this one export flood fill information? Probably a different one that I'm thinking about. So let me just turn this. You can see what flood fill does, right? So flood fill, and then, if I did flood fill to random color, oh, that's triangulator to random color. Flood fill, oh goodness. To color, that's what it is. There's no random in the word there. Okay. So now if I do that, you can see that that flood fill basically identifies all these shapes that are separated, and I can give random colors to them. I could do, uh, you know, flood fill to gradient. And now I can create a whole bunch of random gradients based on all these different patterns, right? And that's exactly what we did actually. So the cool thing is though, with flood fill to corner, check this out. I can now round off all of these different shapes just by adjusting this distance parameter. And there's a whole bunch of really cool parameters here, like preserve cell size, and you can create some really cool, like organic and cellular patterns, like leaves and zoomed in, kind of like organic things like that, just using this flood fill to corner node. It's really neat, really fun to play with. You can even invert this. I'm just having some fun here to create, all kinds of stuff. It's really cool. So we're using flood fill to corner to take our triangulated parts and creating all these pebbles. And then what we did was we used the flood fill to mask to basically take out a few of these. So I could just take my mask here, let's view the blend, and decrease the density. And you can see here, oh, it's over here actually, that we can remove some of these pebbles. And this is a really cool parameter that we can expose. And I can basically say, how many rocks do I want? Do I want just a few pebbles? Great. If I want more, I can just increase the density. And now I have a whole bunch of rocks. And so you can see why, I don't necessarily want this many pebbles. I mean, you could, if you have like a kind of an untouched area in a game or something, or in a scene, that's definitely possible. But by decreasing the density here, we can add some pockets where the eye starts to rest on the, gaps. And we can do something like that. Rocky Beach vibes. Exactly. Exactly. So you can create your Rocky Beach, but then with the same uh, set of nodes or the same material, really, you can just, use one slider to basically say, okay, now I just want this kind of like, a few pebbles scattered there on the kind of like pad. Something like that. And you can customize this to do a whole lot more. But this is one of the things that makes this workflow so powerful. Is just by using, you can see we're only using a few nodes here. The triangular, yeah. Thanks, Davey. The triangulator workflow is really neat. I agree. I mean, and of course, like in InstaMAT, there's like a million different ways to do the same thing, right? We could have just stuck with Voronoi a Voronoi pattern, right? And you could see that we can get some kind of similar looking pattern this way, and we could have increased the count, and we could have used the cracks mode and that kind of stuff too to create something similar. But one of the things I like about the triangulator is that you kind of get these split rocks. And sometimes you get these really cool kind of happy accidents where like the rock is, either by weathering or it's fallen, it's just kind of cracked apart. And it gives you just a slightly different kind of shape than the Voronoi method gives you. But yeah, and this is pretty cool. And then the way that we could get, this many rocks just from like this one pass, like I think when you joined in, was we used the iterate node, and the iterate node basically took our initial pattern and then just blended it on top of itself over and over again, just a few times. I think it's just 2 times actually, and rotating the copy of it 45 degrees as it blended it to give us all of these additional pebbles. And that's how we can, mask the original pattern up down here, right? And that it gives it adjusts those copies so that we get a less dense result. Pretty cool. So let's see if we can start to add some color to this. I'm not going to go too detailed into the coloring part of this because I think really the main information about this material comes down to just that first part of the workflow. But I think what we could do is we could probably do some gradient maps. We can isolate. You can show, I can show you how to isolate the different rocks. In fact, there's probably a better way to blend this together. Instead of using a blend node, we could use a height, like a blend height operation to get us some pretty cool masks as well. Here's where one of our issues lie. I have this levels, and this levels basically is my original large rocks here, not including the iterated rocks, which are the small ones. Now, how do I mask just the big rocks? How do I apply colors? Is it seamless by default? Abstract Duck says, yes, it is. All of these nodes are making everything seamless automatically for you by default. That's one of the magical things about InstaMAT. So if I hit the T key, you can see that I'm tiling this once, and it's completely seamless. I can hit the T key again, right? So yes, absolutely seamless by default here. And this is kind of where the gravel like material starts to come together. We're working at a scale basically of this, which is like you're looking right up at the rocks, your nose right up against the rocks. So we can get this really nice detail in the texture. We're working at 2K for this texture. But if we start to tile this a few times by hitting T, or you can press this button here in the toolbar, now you can start to see that it looks a lot more like gravel. And then you can use this same technique for larger rocks if you want to as well. Fantastic question about tiling. So how do I isolate these larger rocks from the smaller rocks? Well, the levels here is the one that has the larger rocks only. So what I could do is like a grayscale to mask. And what that does, if I connect my grayscale to mask to the base color input so we can kind of see what's going on here, we can start to see how I could kind of isolate the larger rocks from the smaller ones by adjusting this threshold. It's basically saying anything that's, brighter than this or darker than this threshold, I think that's right. Uh, if I lower this, you can see that we can capture that as a black and white mask. So we're going from, if we look at the image viewer here, from this to this. So we did end up capturing the large rocks, and we have a mask now for it. Now, how do we capture the small rocks? Well, we could invert it, or we could subtract this mask from a different mask. So if I do something like, here's my iterate node. Let's do a levels adjustment. We could probably just use a levels adjustment, actually, just by going like this. Right? By crunching down those values. So now, if I connect this to my base color, we're going to see something odd. It's going to look weird, but that's because what we're looking at here is now all the white of the small pebbles, even the ones that are underneath the large pebbles. So it looks a lot like it's kind of like snowing. So we could subtract these two masks. So let's do that. Let's take the blend node here. And I'm going to subtract the big ones from the small ones. Press the wrong one there. There we go. So now you can see we've got some holes here. And let's view that. And so now you can see that we only have the white dots on the small pebbles and not the large ones. That's definitely one way to go about it. I would probably do, instead of using, you can, I mean, you can get really good fine-tune control with the levels. Levels is always a good way to be able to isolate. I can think of it as like frequencies in the histogram, like this. You can actually see that's a lot more smooth now that I've adjusted these handles a little bit. But most of the time, I mean, you kind of want masks like these to be completely black or white. Uh, well, that's not necessarily true. So instead of a levels, though, you could also do another grayscale to mask. And the grayscale to mask has a softness parameter, which also helps. So if I replace this levels with the grayscale to mask, and we lower that threshold, and then we increase the softness. Let's see if I can get, yeah, a nice soft fall off here from the rocks as well. And now we have basically our two maps that we need to kind of start adding color and variance to our material. You can actually see we're missing some of these. So maybe the levels might give me some more flexibility here, although the softness kind of helps. Let's stick with the grayscale to mask for now, and if it becomes a problem, we can switch it up. So I'm going to pop over to this view, so now I can have my graph kind of as a full screen view here. And now that we have our mask, right, our large ones and our small ones, there's a few ways we could do this. We could definitely do another, like a flood fill to random color or to color, right? So if I do a mask here and turn my black and white grayscale to mask to flood fill data first and then connect it to flood fill. Now we have a whole bunch of random colors here. And let's go ahead and start playing with that. So I'll do this. Now we've got a very colorful gravel material. Don't worry, we're going to change those colors to be a very specific pattern in a second. Let's do, there's a mode in flood fill to color to change it from random colors to sample from an image. And the image that we actually have here as an input by default looks like this. It's a gradient. And we can create these gradients pretty easily in InstaMAT. I can say gradient ramp. And now I can just create a gradient like this and give my rocks a range of colors that are going to be randomly applied in the scene. So let's do, I've been really favoring like blue lately for stylized stuff. So let's make this blue. And I'll probably change it once I see what it looks like in 3D, but let's do like a gray and a blue. I don't know, let's just see what this looks like. Connect it over to the color. And you can see what we have. We have randomized colors of these pebbles. I think that's a little too like aqua blue for me right now. So let's probably end up shifting the hue and darkening this a little bit. And then for this guy in the middle, probably brighten it up a little bit. See what's going on there with the ramp. It's pretty neat. And then we can saturate it less. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But it's really easy to adjust these colors. So now I could also weight this differently. So if I move, I think you can see this in both views here. If I move this key it weights how much, how more of those pebbles get gray and how more of them get black. You can add more keys here as well. So that's a good start. Let's also do the same thing for the large ones. And I'm curious to see how the flood fill is going to behave in for the smaller rocks. Anyone have any questions so far? I'm going to take a quick break here with some coffee, and my dog is popping into the frame. You can see her. She wants some attention. Let's see here. Let's do this flood fill operation again. Let's see if we get. Oh, we do. Look at that. Very cool. Flood fills. That's just awesome. It's one of those tools for procedural texturing that just changes the game. Here's my dog. She's saying hi. I have many vids on rusty materials, leaking water and stuff like that. I think, DB, don't you have a video on creating some kind of rusty metal material in InstaMAT? I think there's one on his channel. If he's still around, feel free, DB, to post a link from your channel or something like that. Definitely check out his channel. He's got a lot of cool InstaMAT stuff on there too. But there's also, if we look, okay, Tia, she wants to be part of the stream. There's a rust material built in. So you can see I've actually a whole bunch of rust materials built in. And what you could do, all of the materials that are built into InstaMAT, unfortunately not, I was planning to create something metallic. Okay, well there you go. You've got some interest in the community there for something like that. If you want to make something like that. Yeah, the InstaMat community has been really awesome. You should check out their the abstract Discord server as well. There's a bunch of people on the Discord server. People are sharing their creations and asking questions, and it's pretty cool there. So, um, yeah, check out the Discord there. And then there's also a pretty cool team of people that work over there. From the InstaMat team that can answer all your questions too, which is nice. But you can see here I've got these like this dented rust iron. I can actually double click this material and open it up, and the whole graph of how that rust material is you should fit in abstract Discord. Absolutely. I think they're really gonna like your username over there. But yeah, you can see that you can figure out how this whole material was made just by going inside and looking at all the materials that come with InstaMat. So definitely like go in and dive in and check it out and see, how all these different kind of effects were made. And you can copy and paste. Yeah, it looks a little overwhelming at once, but I think once you break it down, you can see how you've got comments like dents, like this is how the dents were made. And then you've got surface details. And so you can kind of break it down into smaller chunks. I made some rust on one of the materials though. Uh, the crown glass one. Oh yeah, cool. There you go. Yeah, and then you can dive in and look at all these materials and see how those techniques work, just by checking it out. And again, by doing that, all you have to do is just search for a material. You can right click on it, or I guess you could double click on it and then right click on Open Graph, and then that's where you can find all of those. Pretty cool. Then yeah, you can also go ahead and ask questions on the Discord, or ask, when people ask questions on these live streams too, that gives me ideas of like what kind of tutorials I could make as well. So it's always great. Questions are great. I love questions. So here we are on back in our material, and let me just check. I want to make sure I didn't miss anything in the chat. Yeah, I love the InstaMat community. They're great. Oh yeah, and it looks like DB was already talking about the built-in materials as well. Fantastic. So let's do the same thing that we did for the other rocks to these rocks. Playing art creators watching stream. You know what? That's how I get inspired by making materials as well. Like I'll watch either be playing a game or I'll watch playthroughs of like games on YouTube, and I'll be like, "Oh my god, that texture is awesome. I want to make that in InstaMAT." That's how that's how I find a lot of my inspiration for sure. I haven't actually played Art Graders yet, but I hear great things. I hear some really good things about it. I'll have to check it out. Right now, I'm currently playing Hades 2 because I love the Hades series and Supergiant games, and Hades is absolutely fantastic. Um, so that is taking up all of my time for sure right now. Loving Hades, Hades 2, both of them actually. Let's see. I could use the same gradient ramp here actually. Let's see if I can do that. It might be too much. It might be too blue. I might need to dial it down and get some gray, some some kind of some brown as well. We could do. And now that I have this mask, how do I want to do this? I guess I could just blend it, right? And yeah. Mhm, mhm. I'm gonna get this wrong the first time. I know it. Blend. There we go. Can invert the mask. That just makes it easier. There we go. So, what am I thinking? I'm thinking it's way too bright and it's way too colorful for what I'm going for. Also, the roughness of this material is very shiny because we haven't defined any roughness yet. So, let's fix that. I think let me add another key here and darken some of these. I might even darken this one. Things are just too bright in my opinion, but you have those every once in a while. You have those rocks, and we could go into a whole lot more detail on how to add more texture, more pores and cracks and stuff to all this stuff. But I think for today, just the technique and then adding some color and kind of finishing this off is my goal for today. Do I use reference images for textures? All the time. I use references for everything. The reason why I'm not using a reference, funnily enough, for this video is I've done this technique a lot, many, 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 many times to create these kind of materials. Um, but that shouldn't stop me from using a reference. I use references for everything. It is the best way to make sure that what you're creating is accurate and you can find little details that you haven't thought of in your head on any picture and you have multiple references to use from. References are the best. I cannot recommend references enough. You can have a screenshot from a game, and then it's always good to have a good balance between realistic references and artistic references where that's a result of someone's interpretation of creating that kind of material. So you kind of want to balance both of those two. Yeah, references 100%. Absolutely. I'm going to lower the roughness here, or actually, I guess increase the roughness. You can see what that did. Now we have a lot more black here. Which brings up a really good point. We don't have a ground texture, we just have pebbles, and that's pretty easy to do. We can do that in InstaMAT pretty easily because like I showed you just a few minutes ago, we have a whole bunch of built-in materials, and we can blend materials together. So before I get carried away, let's do that. This is looking pretty cool. Also, my normal map could probably use a little more strength. So if I go to the height to normal node here, and I increase the strength. If I increase it to 1, now the rocks are a lot more sharp. down before we were at like a, was it 0.25? If I increase it to get a bit more sharp. And the roughness and the normal map kind of, you balance those. So I can just make it a little more shiny. I could also add some variation. I'm getting carried away here. Let's blend a material together, see how we can finalize this up. So InstaMAT has a whole bunch of awesome stylized materials built in. They were just added in the latest update to InstaMAT. And we've got some stylized soils and concretes. There's a cool concrete here. There's a sandy concrete. Some of these have rocks and pebbles already. We got a stylized pavement. They're really cool. Soil directional. That looks like it could be a pretty good shout. Let's use that one. So I'm just going to drag this material in, and I could just double click this and we could see what the material looks like. So this is built into InstaMAT. You can use this material in your projects today, and it's got customizable parameters for everything here. And you can just go ahead and use this and export the textures out. By the way, if you want to export the textures, you just click this curved arrow, and you can go ahead and just export the maps at whatever resolution that you need with whatever file format. But let's use this material and blend it with the one that we're currently working on. So I'm going to go back to my library here, and I lost it. What was it called? Stylized soil, maybe? There it is, stylized soil. And I just drag it in here, and that's a whole material now as a single node. So here's what's cool. I've got my material make node, which has the culmination of all of my texture maps here for PBR texturing with the height, the normal, the roughness, the ambient occlusion, all of that. And I've got my stylized soil, which also has those same type of maps. Now, if I go in and click this little link here, this is link category mode, and you can see it combines all of those pins together so that I don't have to drag a whole bunch of these over and over again to start doing operations with all of this material information. I can just drag a connection off of here and I can type in blend. And you can see we have a material blend height node available. So that's exactly what I want to do. I want to blend this material with this material. And now we can start to see what we have. It's a good start, but it's not quite perfect on the first go there. So what I could do is I could actually, I want to take the rocks off of the stylized soil, even though they're great. I'm going to take those stones and I'm just going to go get rid of those because I want to use my stones. And I just want to keep the soil on this material. And then I'm going to go and just use this top offset. Let me view the base color here in the image viewer so you can see it at the same time. And I'm also going to move this over so that, there we go. And I'm just going to go bloop like this. And now you can see that my stones are starting to show through here. I need to adjust the contrast of this blending because right now we're getting a lot of jaggedies. That's usually due to the opacity. There we go. So you can see what was happening here was I was at full opacity. This doesn't blend the height information as well. Now I could just do that. And we have now blended these two materials together. And let's move this bottom offset down because right now, yeah, I want to improve the height range here a little bit. Top contrast, opacity, bottom contrast. Just soften that a little bit. And so by combining multiple materials together, you can get like really complex materials very quickly just by doing that. So interesting stuff going on here, right? The colors between these two materials definitely don't match. So that's pretty easy to fix. We've got this color matching option here, and it can say, okay, I want to match material one's color to material two, or vice versa. So if I do one, which is my pebbles, you can see I've now adopted the color information from the second material, and now my pebbles immediately start to blend like that. So this is looking a little bit monotone, but that is definitely a material option, right? You got this gravelly path. Um, we could kind of fade this in a little bit, and that looks pretty cool. Or we could go the other way around, right? Now I can make my soil match the ground a little more, and I probably want to go the other way around, right? I think that's, yeah. You can get some pretty cool variation here. You can make a cool, like, alien rock world this way, but I don't think that's what I want. I'm going to adjust the Luma variation so that we can get bright pebbles and dark pebbles. The hue variation, I don't think is going to do too much here, which is fine. There we go. Let's see. What else do I want to do? I want to see my ambient occlusion a little more, so I'm going to go into my viewport settings and just bump up the AO just a tiny bit so we can start to see things a little more like that. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely open to like our interpretation here for sure. I think I kind of want to blend them a little more. And remember, we can always go back. I go back to here and go to my density parameter, right? With the flood fill to mask. I can add more or less stones, right? So now we've got a soil only. Then we have some rocks. This is that kind of like rocky beach we were talking about earlier. And then I can really make this more rock than beach, more than sand. And I also want to fix kind of this height blending tearing. So to do that, I'm going to insert in between the material make node and the blend node. I'm going to insert the material finalize node. And that did some pretty wacky things. Let's just fix it in a second here. Let's see, we got normal strength, sharpening. I think the sharpening is doing something interesting here in this case. The normal strength, the height blur. The height blur, I think, is what really affected it. You only need a little bit of height blur. And then, let me see if I can. Yeah, the height blur really adjusted that. So maybe I don't want that. Let's undo. I could always blur the height map myself, but really it's just coming down to adjusting these settings and tweaking them ever so slightly. And it could be that maybe this um, stylized soil material, its height is just a little too diverse. We've got these holes in here. And if I see if I can adjust the holes, if that's going to adjust my material too much. Oh, you got some holes in the sand. That's not exactly what I was thinking about. Soil scale. Oh yeah, there we go. That kind of does it. So if I increase the scale here, we get more of these kind of pockets. If I decrease the scale, it's a little more kind of like mounds. Okay, one last thing, and then I think we're going to call it for today. Looks quite cool with the smaller rocks gathering in the deep parts of soil. Yeah, I agree. You can try levels on the height. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Let me try that. So let me expand all of these parameters again. So what DB was saying was I can take this height, which is just the height from the soil, and I can use levels here. And I can crunch this down. And you can see that what it's doing here, right? So it's very bumpy and rocky, the soil, and then I can just kind of flatten the levels of the height map here to make it so that it's less all over the place. But you know what? Now that I look at it, I think I kind of like it. I think I kind of like it with the bumps because it adds that little bit more diversity and detail. But you're absolutely right. That is a great way to be able to adjust the height information and how this is blending just by manipulating the height of the stylized soil itself. So fantastic suggestion. Now, a good point. Yeah, where you have the kind of like natural result of blending by height map this way. I like with the bumps as well. Yeah. I agree. It just adds a little more diversity, right? And actually I think that's like too many rocks, right? So I think we could uh take that density down just a little bit more. I don't know. Now that I look at it, I'm like if I were to design this material, I would probably put I don't know, somewhere around this, and then you could always have variations with more, but I think too much. Just imagine how dirty your shoes would be stepping into this. 100%. 100%. Yeah. So watch your ankles. I wouldn't want to like roll my foot on this. So yeah, if I tile this once, I think this would be the kind of scale that I would view the material more often at just by tiling it once or twice, I guess. And then I would adjust the mask according to this scale. And because we worked at such a small, like a close-up scale, you get all those small pebbles. And what we could do, just kind of building on top of this, and I know we probably don't have time to do this today, but you could take the crevices of this soil and, so here's the ambient occlusion map of this material. And if I invert this, what you end up getting is a mask of all of these divots here. And what we could do is we could just like only have rocks appear in these divots. Temporal pincer, awesome name. Yo, how's it going? We're making a material here in InstaMAT. Hope you're having a great day, and I hope you're having a nice holiday season. What we were looking at here was just, you could create a mask and then you could use a levels and you could say, oh, could double click it, but instead, let's crunch this down. Well, thank you very much. I'm glad you like my content. I'm really happy to be back on YouTube. Glad I caught this live. I'm glad you're here. Great. Welcome. I know we're not gonna be probably live for a bit too much longer, but I'm glad you were able to catch us at the end. That's great. And then we have a mask here. And so what we could do with this is we could basically say, just to drive this home, we'll do this, we'll do this, and we'll do this. So you can visualize what I'm seeing. I now have a mask of exactly where these areas are. And then you could scatter the pebbles to collect in those areas, right? Pretty cool. One last thing. I can't stop. I just can't stop. There's one last thing I have to do because it's one of my favorite things to do with every material that I make, and that is add some water to this material. It kind of looks like sand, and I think I'm going to kind of go with that. So there is a node in InstaMAT called the Material Effect Water node. DB's probably laughing because he knows I love this node. And look at what it does with one slider here. And I probably need to adjust my I need to adjust my height map a little bit to get it to play nicely. We've added some water. Water level. Let's try like, yeah, no, I need to like normalize the height map, don't I? Let's do that. Uh, what does my height map look like right now? Oh yeah, look at that. My favorite nodes. Yeah, I'm glad you like it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, you see, there's actually a whole lot more to our height map than we have here. But I think because it's so dark and the way that I blended this together, we're getting, oh, you know what? I could do the shore wetness and the transition between the two. There we go. And the water level is just like really finicky, right? Because it's just so the way that I blended it. It wasn't really planning ahead with with adding water to this material, but just so you guys can see, you can easily add water to your materials like this, and it just kind of fills in the gaps. It's pretty neat. I actually don't think, yeah, I like it. Just out of curiosity, do you use Substance Designer anymore? I don't use Substance Designer anymore since I have discovered InstaMAT. Um, I just really, really enjoy using InstaMAT a heck of a lot more. Um, Everything I could have done in Substance Designer, I can do in InstaMat and so much more because we can do things like combining meshes and uh, textures and materials together in one graph. And then I can also do things like go in and start, texturing a an asset right here, just like I was in Substance Painter, right? I can just bring in a model. I can just find a material like wood, right? And I can just go ahead and just start, texturing this with procedural materials and painting and things like that. So it's all built into one program, and it just becomes this really, I mean, this is the software that I dreamed about when I was starting to do material creation. Probably cheaper too. Yeah, you can check it out, instamaterial.com. There's a link in the description below. They are not sponsoring this stream, by the way. I just really enjoy their software. And also, I think I mentioned this earlier on the stream, just full disclosure, I do work for Abstract, but I'm not just talking about it because I work for them. I would be making videos for Instamat even if I didn't work for Abstract. So, uh, um, yeah, check out their page, their licensing. There's a free version that you can download called the Pioneer license, and there's a perpetual license as well. I know people like those, and subscriptions as well that are very affordable. Definitely go ahead and check them out. But as you can see here, you know, this was actually the version that I was like concepting. I was just about to ask what studio you work for. Yeah, no, I'm a product specialist for Abstract, so I know a lot of the ins and outs of how to use the Abstract software like Instalot and Instamat. We're going to be using a whole bunch of those, using those software a whole bunch on these streams like this. So I just want to be able to show people all this really cool stuff. And yeah, so this was actually my concept one. You can see that I had a whole lot more small pebbles, right? And then this one, because we started blending in the gravel, or sorry, blending in the soil, we kind of come up with, something a little different. But that's what happens when you do things live like this. I think, we'll take a look at it without the soil as well. I think this is pretty cool. I think this is where we're gonna end. So what I really also like about Instamat is that you can see that we could do a lot with just a few nodes. We have like the dots and the triangulation, and then the MVP, I think, of this whole technique is the flood fill to gradient end pass, where you can create these chips and these plane changes of the pebbles to make them look more like rocks. It does the functionality of a huge collection of blending and gradient combination stuff all in one node. And then if I were to give a runner up, I would have to say it would be the flood fill to corner node, which allows you to round off those triangles, right? You just blend it all together, use the iterate node, and then to create the smaller pebbles, and then that's basically it. You create some masks where you identify the large pieces and the small pieces just by using the grayscale information, using grayscale to mask, and then you have your flood fill to color to randomly color each of the different pebbles with a simple gradient ramp like this, and then you blend everything together. Just wondering, can you do some hand painting in InstaMat too, or is it full procedural? Oh, absolutely. Hand painting, 100%. In fact, I'm using a tablet here, so I can just go ahead and say asset texturing. Let's go ahead and just uh, swap to using a pen, and then I can say multi-channel brush, and then here we are. We can just start painting, and I can create my own brushes in here. There's also some built-in brushes, so if I go down here, paintbrush, let's do something. I could do this scatter coarse brush. Hey, you don't need to do any of that. Just use AI. I think you're in the wrong chat. No, but I know what you're saying. Absolutely. I mean, AI is super powerful, but you can't beat the personal touch. Am I right? So there you go. AI can certainly be helpful in many ways. I use it for concepting sometimes when I just want to see what some things can look like right away and gather some ideas. I usually kind of look at both AI generated concepts and realistic concepts, real things, and just kind of create a big reference board to kind of inspire myself to see what I can create. So I think AI does absolutely have its uses in the creative industry. One thing I'm not so happy about though is just replacing artists with AI, right? Completely. I don't think that's the best thing to do. But then I'm an artist, right? So yeah, you can see that you can do touch-ups and tweaks. I'm just kind of playing around, just making a brush, but you can do absolutely anything you want with painting here in InstaMat. Like I've actually haven't played too much with these brushes in a while. See if I can load this one up. I mean, I tried some AI PBR texturing. It still has too many quirks to be reliable. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy how fast it's evolving, but I agree. I mean, if you can so easily texture something like this, right? Where like this preview, this template here, you can easily build in just a few seconds just by taking some materials and dragging them on, like I was showing earlier. Maybe if I want to do like kind of like a painted iron kind of thing, I could just kind of pop on a material here and then, you know, add another layer, and I'm just gonna have it, like replace all of these different channels. I can get like a shiny paint look here, and then I don't know, like the possibilities are endless. I can use like a volume mask, and the volume mask is neat. I mean, we could do a whole stream on this, right? But the fact is, like, sure, you might be able to have AI get you a neat result, but if I could do this in a few seconds, then I have complete control over this, right? I've got my paint, I've got my stuff. I could just say, now let's replace that with like an iron, you know, and then add the finer things in. Uh, I really like the procedural workflow, and InstaMat takes this to an extremely far level where, if I texture this one crate, then I can take all of the stuff that I'm doing here in my layer stack and immediately apply it onto another crate, another asset, and everything just kind of adapts and paints and applies all in the right place. And it's one of the huge benefits of InstaMat over other software. It's like casino slots. You just put in some tokens and hope for the best. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really nice way of putting it, like, there's the surface level stuff you can do where you can, paint and just add materials in, and for many people, that might be all they need. Search for material, apply it to an asset, make some changes to the material. Like if I have this iron flakes, I have all of my exposed parameters. So instead of an iron, I could do like a cobalt, or it really wasn't a big enough change. Let's do like a gold, and just do that. And that could be all they need, right? But then there's just layers on layers, not to confuse with real layers, but things you could do and really sink your teeth into to do a whole lot more inside of InstaMat as well. And with that skill comes a lot of value. And the value is what it is. It is value. So awesome. You guys have been absolutely awesome today on this live stream. I'm so glad I was able to do this today, and I really hope that I get to do a whole lot more of these. I am working on a tutorial for my YouTube channel. trying to see if I can record it today. It's another kind of rock-based tutorial, and it's a little more straightforward where we don't kind of diverge in all these different conversations and paths. But that's why we do these live streams, right? So we can show some really cool stuff and go on some really cool tangents. So I hope you enjoyed this live stream. Uh, Thank you guys so much for being here. I mean, it's been so much fun. And yeah, are these regular? I'm gonna try and make them as regular as I can. You can follow me on Twitter. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm gonna try and make a post on YouTube when I do, new live streams and stuff like that. But you can follow me on Twitter as well. That's usually where I post my updates. And expect to see a lot more content soon. All right. Thank you guys so much. I hope you continue to have a great, beginning of your new year. And yeah, I will see you in the next live stream or the next video. Take care.